Welcome to another Town Hall Thursday. I am Darryl W. Perry, Libertarian for Governor, and I want to start off with some really great news. As you may or may not be aware, yesterday, August 26th, was the statutory deadline for city and town clerks to verify and validate petitions that have been turned into them from candidates, mainly libertarians. I don't think anybody else was actually petitioning in New Hampshire this year. It was the deadline for them to verify the and Robert, I'm going to mute you because I was hearing some background noise. Was the deadline for the city and town clerks to validate the petitions that had been turned into them. And good news, based on the count that has been kept by the secretary of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, all of the Libertarian candidates that are running for office in New Hampshire this year, including Dr. Joe Jorgensen, the Libertarian presidential candidate, have enough valid petitions to be on the ballot. It's not official yet. We have to then sort those by congressional district, county, and from county alphabetized by municipality, and then take those to the Secretary of State, which we are doing on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, September the 2nd. So if you want to be at the State House to sort of see this happen, where the Secretary of State's office will then count to basically verify that we counted correctly. And I used the royal we there since I wasn't the one actually doing the physical counting, but they make sure that the candidates actually do have enough petitions. And again, we do. We are over by, I don't remember how many off the top of my head, but we do have a margin. Not that that matters, because the Secretary of State's office can't actually invalidate something that has been validated by a city or town clerk. So as long as we don't wind up losing some of the petitions, fingers crossed, between now and Wednesday morning, everything will be good and I will be on the ballot. And hard to believe it's already the end of August. Yes, I know there's still a few days left in August, but pretty soon it will be September. And then, you know what that means, the major parties, the Republicans and Democrats, they have their taxpayer-funded nomination process. And then just, I think it's 60 short days after that, or it might even be less than 60 days this year. After the primary is the general election. And again, we're very close to, that. And Robert just posted it's 56 days after this year. I know it's generally right around that 2-month period. But yeah, we're really into campaign season right now. And again, things are still kind of weird from the pandemic, everything that's going on. Still smart to take precautions. If you've seen any of the news stories about some of the major colleges that have had to, about a week after starting classes, close down, send everybody home. UNC Chapel Hill is probably the largest as far as enrollment. I believe Notre Dame had to do the same thing. The college that I'm now enrolled in, they have had only a handful of people that tested positive for the COVID-19. Those students have either been sent home or they are quarantining or self-isolating in a facility somewhere near, I'm guessing they're probably students that live near campus anyway. But yeah, so stay safe. I'm still trying to socially distance. I do have to go do, like random household things like grocery shopping, but wear the mask, use the hand sanitizer, take precautions. There is going to be, and this is very surprising to me, there is actually going to be a Queen City Pride happening in Manchester on September 12th. And I'm assuming that they are going to make sure that social distancing takes place and that there's going to be masks available for everybody in attendance, and probably hand sanitizer everywhere. I will be there. I do have a booth, so if you want to stop by, get a t-shirt, get a yard sign, and yes, I do have some yard signs. I initially wasn't going to get them, and now this is just, sort of me talking about the campaign a little bit. I initially was not going to get yard signs, but after speaking with a campaign consultant, he had said, even though you're doing billboards and you're planning to do radio ads, you still need to do yard signs. If nothing else, the very least, to have something to give to supporters so that they can put it in their yard, because people like displaying yard signs for candidates that they support. So I do have some yard signs, limited supply, which I guess everything's still limited supply since we aren't post scarcity. But I when I say limited supply, I mean a very limited supply of yard signs that I will be willing to part with, if you will. So let me jump into talking about police accountability and the Lori list, because I feel like I've talked about the good news and the campaign for long enough. And if you're not familiar with the Lori list, you should be, even if it might be going away. The official name of the Lori list is the Exculpatory Evidence Schedule, that right now police officers, and we don't know who is on it. I believe at some point a number, like the actual number, was made public, but we don't know who is on the Lori list. But it's where police officers that have been naughty go on. They go on the Lori list, and then, well, that's really it. There's no appeals process to be taken off of it, and generally, as far as anybody actually knows, there's not actually any ramifications for being placed on the Lori list. But there is still the Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability, Community, and Transparency that is still meeting. Renelle Sheila, one of the people involved with Black Lives Matter Manchester, was on the town hall a few weeks ago. I forget exactly what date she was on, but she is one of technically two public members of this commission. I say technically because the other public member is a former police officer, former police chief, former liquor commissioner, or liquor code enforcer, because I think technically liquor commissioner is someone that serves on the liquor commission, whereas the people that actually work for the liquor commission doing policing stuff have a different name. But really, Renelle Sheila is the only public member of this commission. But after some lengthy discussion recently, and I'm actually honestly surprised that this commission is still meeting. I thought that they were done at the beginning of August, but they're still meeting. The union leader has an article here about the latest suggestions from this commission, and one of them is to sort of revamp how the Lori list operates and to also make it public. ... So again, right now, anybody that's on the Lori list has no appeals process. They can't wind up appealing their name being on the Lori list. Presumably, they are made aware that their name is on the list, uh, but there's no way to officially get off of the Lori list. But the proposal is to allow for an appeals process. The recommendation, according to the union leader, was approved Wednesday and would give officers 6 months to notify a Superior Court judge if they wish to have their name removed. After another 6 months, the identity of the officers would be made public unless there was an appeal that was still ongoing. Now, again, just because it's a recommendation from this commission does not mean that it then becomes law. It doesn't mean that this is actually what's going to happen. It means that this is a recommendation that presumably the Department of Safety or the governor could wind up implementing, but I'm not really sure how it moves out of this commission into actually being something that is effectively the law of the land. They also suggested that police have body cameras and that all police cruisers have a camera on the dashboard. Now, I know that libertarians are split on body cameras, and I understand the arguments in favor of body cameras. However, I tend to be opposed to body cameras. Not because I don't support police accountability. I do 109 billion%. But what I see with cameras, and the same could be said about the Big Brother's eyes that got put up in downtown Manchester, where it's just, here's a camera that's constantly showing stuff. It's surveillance. But for some weird reason, if you have the surveillance roam around the city or your town 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, somehow it's not surveillance. And I know that right now, the footage of the body cameras isn't used to later find out who was jaywalking or who ran a red light if they weren't caught at the time that it happened. That doesn't mean that it won't happen. And that's where I sort of look at this, sort of Orwellian technology going. But at the same time, again, I understand why body cameras are important. I understand why the dashboard cameras are important. We also know that body cameras have caught police planting drugs because, well, they forgot how the body camera worked, where there's, like a looping 30 or 60 seconds that just keeps getting recorded. But whenever you press the start, it automatically saves that previous 30 or 60 seconds. And I believe it was Baltimore where one of these things came out showing cops planting drugs in multiple people's cars. And then the police chief said, well, we just need to teach them how to properly use the body cameras, which is code for we need to teach them how to not get caught doing something that they should not be doing. But again, in the cars, in the cameras in the cruisers, if it's only being used during the stop, I'm okay with that. The body cameras, if they're used while actually, investigating a crime or actively working on something, I have less of a problem with that. But I also know that these things tend to have glitches and I'm using air quotes there if you had stepped away and you aren't watching the video, because there have been a lot of cases where the video just stops and this guy that was handcuffed in the back seat of a police cruiser somehow magically shot himself in his temple when he didn't have a gun on him when he was handcuffed, and he was shot in the right temple, but he's actually left-handed. So there, are all kinds of weird things that happen. Having body cameras isn't going to stop that because, well, if a cop wants to get away with something, they will find a way to get away with whatever it is. I also noticed, and I have the online article pulled up here. Oh, and they do have it. I thought that they had removed something from the online article that was in the actual newspaper, but they do mention here what is legally in New Hampshire referred to as official immunity, which is different from qualified immunity, and is slightly different from statutory immunity. So government officials and police in particular have at least 2, if not 3 different types of immunity to protect them. The commission, surprise, surprise, rejected a proposal to do away with official immunity, which under state law, the union leader writes here, prevents someone from prevailing in a civil lawsuit against police and other public officials if their actions were within their assigned duties. Now, notice that, and then I'll contrast that with what the ACLU is quoted as saying here in just a moment. But if a police officer or other government official does something that is within their assigned duties, they cannot be sued civilly in the state of New Hampshire. It doesn't matter if what they did violates your civil rights. They can't be sued because, well, it was within their assigned duties. The ACLU rightfully points out, along with some trial lawyers, which that actually surprises me, they have called for this change, arguing that it denies victims of police brutality their day in court, because that's exactly what it does. If you have had your rights violated by a police officer, you should be able to sue for a violation of rights. But because of qualified immunity, unless there was another case that prevailed in the exact same circumstances, you will not prevail under qualified immunity. Under official immunity here, you can't bring the case at all as long as the officer or other government agent was acting within their assigned duties. It doesn't matter if they were acting outside the scope of law, as long as it was within their assigned duties, you are held without, or you're kept without recourse. You cannot prevail in a civil lawsuit. The commission here, or rather the article says, commissioners representing law enforcement said it would have a chilling effect on officers being able to keep the peace, and it would hurt recruitment efforts. Well, let me make a comparison here. And I know that analogy by comparison is not, or proof by analogy is not proof, but let me make a comparison. If, let's say you went to a restaurant and the waiter punched you in the face, you would probably wind up suing the waiter, the restaurant owner, and probably the manager, whoever you could think of involved and connected with that restaurant, you would sue. Now, if the waiter or waitress said, well, I was just doing what my boss told me to do, that would not get this thrown out in court. Do you think that knowing that waiters can be held liable for assaulting customers at a restaurant has, a chilling effect on people wanting to work in the restaurant industry? Does it hurt the recruitment efforts of the restaurant? No, it doesn't. What this is saying is that, well, nobody wants to be a cop if they can't just beat people up without getting away with it. That's what this is saying. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that's a cop is, a violent thug, but what I am saying is that they work for an organization that has a monopoly on the initiation of force. They're okay with that, and they enforce all kinds of unjust laws. That's what police do. They enforce unjust laws. And don't worry, I know that statement didn't just lose me the police union endorsement. I was never going to get that to begin with. But, again, to say that we need immunity for government officials, otherwise they won't want to be government officials, really sounds like the Nuremberg defense that, or I guess technically it shouldn't be called the Nuremberg defense because, well, the Nuremberg principles and the Nuremberg court rejected the defense by saying that just because, it was part of your duty is not an excuse. And I realize that I oversimplified and paraphrased the Nuremberg principles there, but I'm just doing my job is not a valid excuse under international law. Why should it be a valid excuse in local court when you violate somebody's rights? Again, I do applaud the commission here for taking the step to make public the lorry list. And I actually believe that the police should have a right to appeal here. I'm not sure what standards the courts are going to wind up using. Because in certain trials, the plaintiff has, their evidence is given sort of the benefit of the doubt. And in other cases, the defendants get the benefit of the doubt. In this, obviously, it would be the police officer that would be the plaintiff, or there's another term that's used when you initiate the complainant. And then the police department would be the respondent or the defendant. But yeah, if somebody is wrongfully put on the lorry list, they should be able to be removed. I don't want to see this appeals process be basically a rubber stamp of removing everybody, even when there is evidence that the person should have been placed on this. Someone says, is there anything not covered in the lorry list? And well, here's the thing about the lorry list. We don't really know exactly what the standards are for being placed on the lorry list other than some kind of misconduct. And the definition of misconduct is going to be interpreted differently probably throughout all of the 200 and some odd towns, and then the 13 cities, and then the 10 county sheriff's departments, the state police, I'm assuming probably the fish and game department, the liquor commission overseeing their liquor enforcers. But yeah, like this is something that we actually need to know. Like, what are the standards for being placed on this list? And right now, like, there's just so much secrecy around the lorry list. And there's actually been lawsuits brought forth by the ACLU of New Hampshire and the union leader to try to make this public. But again, it's something that is still working its way through the courts. But if this does go forward, and if you go to my website, darrylwperry.com/issues, I actually mentioned something similar to this of all instances of misconduct should be reported, that police officers, if they witness one of their coworkers in an act of misconduct, and that could be anything from accepting a bribe, attempting to bribe someone, assault, like there's a lot of misconduct. And again, I don't have the definition that I used pulled up. But right now, there's discussion about a duty to report. I want it to be a duty to intervene, where if you see if you see one of the supposed few bad apples doing something, don't turn a blind eye and then write it down later. No. Be an active good apple and stop them. And then you report it. And then the report gets investigated. And then the report becomes public. That's what I want to happen. And I realize that a lot of that would require some legislative involvement. I don't believe that it's something that a governor could just wind up saying, this is going to happen with the strike of a pen. And I'm fairly confident that that is not something that a governor could just do with a strike of a pen. But we do need to know who these few bad apples are. And I would say that they should wind up being completely removed from law enforcement and not be allowed to work in law enforcement anymore in the state of New Hampshire if they wind up getting fired for being on the Lori list and being a bad apple. Normally, and I've got a couple of new people here watching in the Zoom, you can go to darrylwperry.com/Zoom, or you can watch on Facebook. And I did wind up creating that short URL, darrylwperry.com/Facebook. I like to go at least 30 minutes up to an hour. Since I'm solo tonight, I am going to keep it closer to 30 minutes. I don't monitor the Facebook live stream for comments and questions. So if you have questions, you do need to jump into the Zoom to post those where I will see them. A lot of nights when I first started doing this, my wife was monitoring the Facebook for me and then importing questions into Zoom. She now has a job working for a presidential candidate. I will give you a hint. It's not Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And so she has a lot of work that she has to do basically all the time. And one of the pieces of software that she's been working with is, well, it's been glitchy. So she's been having to constantly put out fires for the last few nights. And the last couple of weeks, she's had things that she's had to do at the time that I'm live. So I don't think I'm going to have anyone that's bringing those questions from Facebook over into the Zoom. So if you do have questions that you want answered during the live stream, you do need to head over into the Zoom, darrylwperry.com/Zoom. Next week, I have Tobin Menard, who's running for state rep in Sullivan 9, I believe it is. And then in 2 weeks, I have Spike Cohen, who was originally scheduled for last night. He'll be on in 2 weeks. And then I'm still working on getting people scheduled for the rest of September and October. Later in September, I believe the 24th, I'm going to have Matt Simon from the Marijuana Policy Project. He is, I believe, still the New England Regional Director for MPP. At the very least, he's the New Hampshire chair or director of Marijuana Policy Project. He'll be on September 24th. And like I said, I'm still working on getting people scheduled for the rest of the days between now and November when the election is. in the Zoom chat, Sam says, I came in a bit late, missed the part about what the Lori list is. Could you please explain? Yeah, so the Lori list, again, officially is called the exculpatory evidence schedule that police officers get placed on, presumably for misconduct. But again, we don't really know what the actual standards are for cops being placed on this. And there's currently not a right to appeal. So if a cop feels that he's wrongly placed on the Lori list, there's no way for him or her to be removed from the list. But again, the commission on, and I've got to find the name of it here, the Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability, Community, and Transparency has come up with a proposal to have a right of appeal. And once this gets formalized in whatever manner it gets formalized, anyone on the list will have 6 months to file an appeal. And then within 6 months after that, so presumably within 12 months, the Lori list will be made public, except for the names of anyone who has an ongoing pending appeal. And I guess ongoing and pending are basically the same thing. But any of the appeals that have been completely finalized, if the officer remains on the list after that appeal is finalized, that name would get made public. Anyone who does not appeal would also be made public, presumably along with the reason that they were placed on the list in the first place. Again, DarrylWPerry.com is the website if you want to learn more about my issues. DarrylWPerry.com/issues. Issues are also on the front page of the website. If you want to request an absentee ballot and you have some questions, you can either watch the video from last week or just click on the big giant thing at the bottom of the front page that says request absentee ballot. Takes you to a page on the site that has the forms that you can download. It also has instructions for how to request the absentee ballot, how to vote absentee, things of that sort. And again, because of the ongoing pandemic, you can actually register to vote absentee this year, where previously you've had to jump through hoops and hurdles to be able to do that at a time and place other than the city or town clerk's office or on election day. So there's info on that as well. And again, if you want to donate to the campaign, DarrylWPerry.com. I do have, and I want to make sure that I mention this a bunch. In about a week and a half, I have a billboard going up in Manchester on Queen City Avenue or Queen City Boulevard. I forget if it's Avenue or Boulevard, but going up on Queen City right near 293. And I am looking at, I've already got a price quote on radio ads. I still need a few $100 more to be able to get the radio ads that would cover the Seacoast and Manchester Concord. There's a couple of other billboards that I'm looking at as well, but now's crunch time for being able to do things, advertise in more traditional manners. Plus, I'm going to continue doing the Town Hall Thursdays. There are some virtual candidate forums that I have already attended, others that I will be attending. And again, the petition delivery where the Libertarian candidates, I believe all of us, with one or two possible exceptions, will be at the State House Wednesday morning, turning in the petitions to the Secretary of State's office. That's Wednesday, September 2nd at 9 o'clock outside the State House. I'm not sure if the State House building is open yet, how that's going to wind up working, or if the Secretary of State or somebody from the office is going to come outside and collect our petitions, like how some of us had to do when we filed our candidate paperwork back in early June. But I believe there's an event for that on the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Facebook page. Robert asked, will the media be there? I know they're being invited. I cannot guarantee or say for certain one way or the other about whether or not they will actually show up. But I know that they have been invited. There have been, in some of the previous years, there have been media present for the petition turn-ins. Some states it happens all the time, other states not so much. I honestly don't remember what happened in New Hampshire 4 years ago. So again, website, darrylwperry.com. If you would like to donate to help with any of the advertising that I have planned, darrylwperry.com/donate. If you want to donate for some other reason, like, oh, well, I'd really like a shirt. And then, Darryl, you would thank me as a donor with a sign that I could put in my front yard, darrylwperry.com/donate. T-shirts for everybody that donates over $50, which means, Robert, yes, I owe you a T-shirt. Shoot me a message with your shirt size. I'll get it to you the next time I see you. And again, I will be at the Queen City Pride on September 12th. And next week, just a reminder, Tobin Menard, running for state rep in Sullivan 9, will be my guest, which means we'll go a little bit longer and be closer to that 1 hour time instead of 30 minutes. When is Spike on? Spike is on in 2 weeks, September the 10th. So if you're wondering why Spike wasn't here last week, he wound up going on a bus and going on tour, kind of like what Jo Jorgensen did. I believe her tour started just a couple days after she was on the town hall. That was so successful, and I believe because Spike was supposed to have originally gone on tour at the same time that Joe was, but he had something come up to where he couldn't. So they delayed his by a couple of weeks, and then it just wound up being a scheduling conflict. And, well, the bus tour is more important. I will acknowledge that. So had to delay. He'll be on September 10th. Tobin Menard next week. And after that, aside from knowing when Matt Simon from Marijuana Policy Project is on, I'm not, I'm not completely firm with any of the other guests or the dates, other than every Thursday I do the town halls 6 p.m. Eastern time. And I guess technically all of them will be Eastern Daylight Time, because we end daylight savings time on Halloween, and then the election is like the first Tuesday in November. So yes, all of them Eastern Daylight Time. Adjust for your time zone if for some reason you're not in New Hampshire and you're watching these. Also post them on the YouTube, which you can find at darrylwperry.com/YouTube. And make sure you send a text message with the word Perry, my last name, Perry, to 77948. Have a good night. I'll see you next week.